piece of food.
Good morning. This is Avraham Shira from Nar Shalom, and we are learning in Torah Het of Likutei Moharan. We've learned an amazing series of concepts that lead us to the promised land, and all of them depend on the lungs. The Rebbe explains that the lungs are the source of song, of prayer, of praise, the source of Torah learning, the source of prophecy. And these lead to honor, to faith, the repair of faith, and to the idea of that inner shofar blast, the shofar that comes out from within and announces to the world that there is a God, and He's good, and He's got a plan, and all we got to do is join the plan. With all that, and that string of concepts that we've been watching for a long time, develop and be redeveloped and go over and over, today we come to a famous piece of Talmud from Bava Batra. It concerns Og Melech Bashan. Now, Og is an interesting character because he appears in the Zohar. He also appears in the Chumash, and there are opinions about who he was. But the basic accepted opinion is that he was the children of the Anakim, as was mentioned 3 times in this week's Parsha, that when Moses sent the spies into the land, they saw giants. And the Torah, the Chumash itself, tells us that they were the children of giants. Now, who were giants? They were angels that desired human women. And they came down, and they didn't get the manual right that as angels, if they were hooking up with human women, that they would become physicalized, and they would not be able to go back to heaven. This is a claw in general about angels, is that if they partake of the pleasures of the physical world, they start to become physical. Now, this might seem rather fantastic and out there in, metaphysical wonderland, but we see it clearly in the Arizal's writings that Adam himself was a spiritual being that became physical from eating from the eights of Dat Tova Ra. That there was this materialization of the spiritual that became physical, and this concept still exists. And we see it by the angel of Manoach. We're told by the Zohar that the angel that visited the wife of Manoach, of course, who was the mother of Samson, that angel was offered food and he refused to take because he wanted to go back to heaven. And some say that angel was actually had participated in the Suda, in the meal with Abraham hundreds of years before. So this concept of moving between the physical and the spiritual is not hard for us in the Torah, especially when you have Zohar and you have all the different midrashim that open up these ideas. For a person who's never seen them before, it seems pretty fantastic, pretty Hollywood. But so, for our purposes today, we want to understand a little bit about this fellow Og, because God creates everything in perfect balance. And if there's a great leader like Moses in holiness, there has to be a great leader in the unholiness. And this is true throughout every generation. There's always a leader in the spiritual worlds, whether it's from the side of the holy or the unholy. And there has to be, in order to maintain free choice and balance. So if there's a great tzaddik in Brooklyn, like the Lubavitcher Rebbe, there has to be a great guru somewhere who's doing avodah zarah and practicing occult practices to seduce people. And certainly there were those kind of fellows maybe until today. And nonetheless, this dichotomy is something that we know we have to have in order to create free choice. And in the time of Moses, well, we had Balaam, the prophet. We're told directly that Balaam was the Mida Keneged Mida, the measure for measure prophet from the other side to counterbalance the prophet of holiness, Moses. But then there is this other concept of the fallen angel, which this guy can live hundreds and hundreds of years. And he reappears in the stories in the Midrash from the flood. We're told that Og was actually in the time of the flood, which was that was only 16 generations before Moses, so he had to be a pretty old fellow, right, to make it from the flood all the way to the generation of Moses. Some say that it was a reincarnation of this character. But nonetheless, we are told that he was the king of Bashan. Now, Bashan is a land over here on the other side of the Jordan River, about maybe 100 kilometers from Jerusalem. It is Keneged, I think, northern Jordan and southern Syria and parts of the Golan. He was called king of Bashan. And why was he king? Well, the Gemara is going to tell us that he was 10 amos tall, which is about 5 meters. So you figure he was twice as tall as, as any NBA star. And such a fellow would naturally be king around anybody else. And he's accredited with a lot of supernatural powers as well, which fallen angels we know had these powers. And we are told that the spies went into the land and they were afraid of who they saw. They said we're like grasshoppers in their eyes. And the Torah mentions it 3 times, which usually, if something's mentioned 3 times, we're supposed to take a lot of notice to it. Now, I was just talking to a friend here at Nar Shalom about this cult called Scientology. I believe Scientology follows the idea that the human race came from fallen angels. Well, you know, as usual with non-Torah theoretical constructs, what we might call false religions, there's a spark of truth in this. There were fallen angels. They did unite with humans and create a sub-angelic race. But there's still God. There's still God behind the whole picture. And we don't call them the gods of the world. We just say that there's this spiritual being that became physical, that united with women and created children that became giants. And okay, then we had to deal with them. I just saw a report recently that was hidden by the United States Army, the Rangers. Again, it could be fake news, but there was a report, a squashed report from about 7 years ago, that some Rangers in the desert in Afghanistan encountered a giant that lived in a cave, etc., etc., etc. You could look it up. And if you believe it, if not, you could check it on Snopes and see if there's any legitimacy to the story. But there is something going on over there, because these soldiers were only waited 7 years to make their report about the battle that was fought with this giant. And, you know, whether it's true or not, okay, I don't know. I wasn't there. But it's interesting because the concept does appear in the Torah, and that gives it a certain legitimacy in our minds. Now, Og, this king, he had it in for Moses because he was, you know, like any king, he wants to be the head honcho, the big goose in the flock. Now, the Gemara is going to tell us a story that is cryptic and strange and hard to believe, and I do not believe we're supposed to take it literally. When we learn it, according to Rabbi Nachman's understanding, it becomes a diagram of a prophetic pathway, okay? And it becomes a historical explanation of what we've been learning for the last 2 months in this Torah. So let's go into the Gemara, and we'll see where it takes us. And I want to welcome all of you to our Patreon class, because we're going to continue with those classes every day. And this trailer is really a preview of what we're doing in there. And I hope all of you can join up. And we're constantly adding new things and changing our tier structure pretty soon to invite more people. Okay, so the story begins like this. Perush Ma'amar Rabotenu Zichronim Evracha Al Og Melech Bashan Amar Machni Yisrael Kamahave. The king Og said, how big is the camp of Israel? Talata Parseh, 3 parses, which is about 6.5 miles square, which is a pretty nice sized camp. So he went and uprooted a mountain of 3 parsas big. Now that's a pretty big job, to uproot a mountain that's 6 miles wide. And he threw the mountain. And it He carried this mountain, I should say, and it fell on top. He carried it on his head, Ot ve'aresha, and it sat on his head. This mountain.
It's a giant.
And this mountain that was on his head Nachet alei av tzavarei, and came to his. Wait a minute, I jumped apart. There was ite ale kumtza v'nukvua. A bunch of ants came and ate the core of the mountain that was on his head. You know, he's got this mountain on his head like a giant sombrero, and a bunch of ants came and ate a hole around the mountain of rock, and then the whole thing came down upon his neck, and when his neck came down, when the mountain came down on his neck because they ate it out, he wanted to throw it off himself. Okay, strange, right? And while he was trying to throw off this, now it's like a giant bagel, right? It's a bagel 3 parses long around his head, and he can't get it off. Why? Because his teeth jutted out of his mouth and stuck into the inner walls of the bagel. Interesting, right? Moshe, come, and now we jump to Moshe, and they ask, how big was Moses? Asar, well, Moses himself, we said, is 10 amas tall, which is about 5 meters. He could also make it in the NBA. Asar amin v'shakol narga bat asar amin, and he took a 10 amma spear and shavar say amin, and he had an axe also that was huge like this, mache bekarsile, and he struck Og on his heel. Right? What is going on here? We've got this giant with a big mountain donut on his neck, and it's stuck there by his own teeth. And Moses comes along with this giant axe and strikes him on the heel and kills him. Vukatle. Wonderful. He's done. He's gone. Og is finally finished. Now, I had a question. If this guy was so big and so strong, how could a little striking him in the heel kill him? And then when I was learning this, I remembered the Achilles story from the Greeks and the idea of the Achilles heel, that he was a great warrior and he was struck in his heel, and so on and so forth. This is not a new idea. So we're going to have to go now into Rabbi Nachman's explanation of this Torah to understand what in the world the Gemara is telling us, because it's clear the rabbis are extremely wise, insightful, and creative people, and they use metaphors to teach us things that are going to transcend time. And the only way you can teach and transcend time is to put things in a metaphorical format, right? Because otherwise, one generation, the next generation, it's going to be lost. So this is what we're going to continue with today on our Patreon course, and I welcome all of you to join us. We look forward to seeing you again, and have a great day. God bless you, and we'll see you soon.